Welcome to Comic Spot, everybody out there in Facebook land, wherever you're at on Steve Cooper's page. Welcome. I'm Linda Marcus Smith. I'm the host of Comic Spot, and I'm so proud today because Comic Spot was originated where this little Army veteran vets out veterans of comedy. And today we got lucky, you guys. We got somebody here who is a veteran of comedy. And I'm going to get right to his intro before I say his name. And I'm going to read you his particular, soon as I find cat lady glasses. Sometimes things don't perfectly. Here is Steve Cooper's bio. I read your words and I give you credit for them, Steve, lest I should be considered a hack. I don't want to take your words. Plus, I can't memorize for nothing. He says, I've done over 800 episodes on my podcast, Cooper Talk, including interviews with many rock and roll Hall of Famers. Yeah. Emmy winners, Oscar winners, Grammy winners, and has been seen on TV and the movie screen, you guys. Give it up. He's here. He's a comedic legend and everything else. The host of Cooper Talk, Steve Cooper. Hi, Steve.
Thank you, man. You make me feel so important. Like
You
a
are.
legend. Like
I
wish my wife was here because I say, see, honey, I told you I'm a legend. And she'd be like, shut up. Just shut up.
It's hard to be like appreciated in your own hometown, so to speak.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy. You know, I moved back. I was in LA for a long time. And I moved back to the Philadelphia area where I grew up about 3 years ago. And it's different when I lived in LA for so long, and because people have seen me, I've interviewed so many celebrities and got to know a lot of them, that now when I move back, they're like, I'm a different person. You know, it's like, they think like you know all these people. And I'm like, I talk to them, but it's weird. I mean, you know how it is being a comic. You meet so many people, and people I knew years ago, like Adam McKay, who's now won Oscars. You know, we used to hang out in Philadelphia, me, him, Paul Tompkins, Keith Robinson. We would just do comedy back. And this is like 1988. And some of the people just end up doing so well. And it's just crazy.
Yeah. Well, I want to hear about you as a little kid. I don't think you were bald-headed back then, but you were probably funny.
Well,
I want to hear this.
When I got on Facebook, a girl I went to high school who hadn't seen me in years went, holy crap, what happened to your hair? You had such and I had like that Dave Coulier do. And but as a kid, you know, I'm the youngest of three. And I was always I was quiet, you know, I was sort of shy. And then I went to a stage where I wouldn't shut up. I mean, my mom tells a story. I was at a diner with her, and I'm just talking to this guy. I tell him the story about this toy car. And he looks at my mom. He goes, your son is so nice, but I have no idea what he just said because I talk really fast. And then I started cultivating my sense of humor. And in high school, I was pretty popular. You know, I wasn't one of the big popular guys, but I used to make people laugh, and I wasn't a class clown. I would sit next to someone, and I'd always make a comment, and they'd laugh. And in fact, years later, I ran into a friend of mine. He's like, I always knew you'd do comedy because you were just so damn funny, but you were never like that obnoxious jerk. Like, you know the people, and you run into it in comedy where they're, before you go on stage, you're like, oh, you're telling jokes. You're like, save it for the stage, buddy. You know, save it till we get up there because it's not working on me because I'm getting ready for my set.
Exactly. You just described me at a comedy club.
You're quiet?
No.
You're loud?
I'm a little social butterfly, and I'm always on stage making cracks. And, you know, I was the one that had to have the whole classroom know I pulled the prank. You know, I'm obnoxious. What can I say, Steve?
You don't seem it. You don't seem obnoxious. You seem very nice. I mean, I've never really met you, but it's not like you can always tell though, like the obnoxious comics, and they're the ones that aren't funny. I used to work with this guy, and I remember we were doing a show up in like New Canaan, Connecticut. And this guy, I'm not going to mention his name, as soon as he sees these two cute girls in the bar, he's like, hey, we're the comics. And I'm like, dude, don't put me on the spot. I'm going over my notes. I'm getting ready for stage. But it was just that thing. And you had said that you know Paul Lyons. And
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you a very funny story about Paul Lyons. I've known Paul Lyons probably since 1988 or 89. And we were on a gig together on the road. I don't know where we were playing. It was, all those one-nighters. And then it was, and I still do this to the day. He told me not to use shaving cream because it's a marketing ploy by the razor companies. And I listened to him, and I have not used shaving cream in 30 years, and I never cut myself shaving. And that was because of Paul Lyons.
Wow. Holy Toledo. And you're both bald.
Exactly. See, he had hair too. He used to go by his first headshots. It said Paul Tiger Lyons, because like Tiger and Lyons, but it's Tyger. And I always cracked up because he told me we were at some club, and he's like, I wish they'd take that down. And it said Tiger Lyons, and I just laughed because it's like, it's the late '80s, and you want your name to be different. Like my mom would always tell me to spell Steve maybe Steev. And I'm going like, yeah, but then people are going to think I'm like Swedish or something. And I'll get up and I'm like, he's not Swedish. So it was interesting.
You say that like Swedish is beneath being British.
Well, the funny thing is I have two very good friends from Norway, and they hate the Swedes. And I remember they took me to a Swedish festival in LA, and I was wearing a Norwegian soccer shirt, and this lady like yelled at me because I had a Norwegian shirt on, and it was a Swedish festival. And she like said something to me, and I didn't get it because it was in Swedish. Even though they speak Norwegian, they knew what she said. And they're like, man, she just sort of called you something pretty bad, dude.
I was a banker for 20 some years. I lost count. And we had a guy come in to open a bank account one day, Steve. And so I had to ask him, what's your name? And oh my gosh, where's that from? And he goes, I'm Danish. And I go, oh, okay. And the next professional question I had to ask is, what kind of work does he do? Because, God forbid we should miss a cross-selling opportunity. You know what I'm talking about? And so I don't really care. I'm just going through the motions. And, oh, you're Danish. And what kind of work do you do? And he's like, I'm a Finnish carpenter. And I'm like, oh, I can't even write this material. This is too crazy.
My Norwegian friends, one grew up pretty much in America, and the other won the green card in Norway. And when he moved over, he was my roommate for a while. And we would sit there and we'd be drinking, and it'd be late. And he would start speaking to me in Norwegian. And I just sit there. I didn't know what to say. And 10 minutes into the conversation, he's like, oh, crap, you don't speak Norwegian. And I'm like, yeah. So I just sit there and let him go because you don't want to be rude because the guy was passionate. And I'm thinking, I have no idea what the hell he's saying.
So my daughter was in her senior year of high school, and she thought she'd get extra credit if I could let a foreign exchange student live in our basement studio apartment. And so somehow they didn't notice I didn't have enough space to have a student. And they let this Swedish guy who was taller than the eaves of the door move in with the two women. He was so mad. And his name was Marcus with a K, Oyut Kangas. I'm still looking to find him. It took him 2 days, and he was asking for a new location. He's like, I'm out of here.
That's funny.
He's going to be sorry when I'm rich and famous, don't you think?
See that? He's going to be like, you know what? I should have been nice. I could be sleeping in her guest house. But now, she's saying, screw you, Marcus. You get out of here, Marcus. We don't want your fight. We like Norwegians. We'll let Norwegians in. No damn Swedish. Which I found out. I did that eHarmony, whatever. Not eHarmony. The thing where Ancestry. My wife got me. I'm 1% Swedish, and I was surprised. And I'm part Finnish too, and I knew I was German and English. But I was like, wow. I'm like Sweden. I'm like I'm 1%. Like, how did they even tell? I mean, 1% is like my toe. And it's like, I don't understand what they're doing when they sit there and you get this chart and you're like, what the hell? At least I knew I was English, German, Austrian, and Yugoslavian. But I don't know where the Swedish came from and the Finnish. And I'm like, yeah. So, no, Norwegian, not Swedish.
I'm so glad Hitler didn't have that access to that stuff. We'd all been screwed because there's always one of us in a wood pile.
Exactly.
There's a little bit of us and never mind, you get the point. Okay, so let's get back to you growing up and getting on stage. You've done acting, you've done comedy, you do a podcast with 800 and some episodes. What got you started in entertainment and which came first and why?
When I was in college, I got on stage for my first time. It was called I went to Stockton State in New Jersey. It was called Mr. Stockton. And it was like a beauty contest thing, but I did it as a joke. And I did a Rick Springfield air guitar. And I brought the house down and I said, I got to get on stage. And I told my mom and dad, I'm like, I would love to do comedy. And when they said, well, wait till you get out of college. So I graduated college. And then there was a learning annex class in Philadelphia. And it taught me how to put an act together. And I just started doing comedy. And I would back then it was a Comedy Factory outlet and the Comedy Works. And I would just hit them, all their open mics. And then I got a job working the door to Comedy Factory outlet. So I could see great acts. And then I would get select stage time. So I just started growing as an act. And then I got along with people. And so people started recommending me. So I started going on the road somewhat and getting weekends at places. And that's what started it. And I loved it. And it was great. But then, I fell out of love with it. I don't know why. I think I was just getting bored with it because I was doing 250, 300 shows a year. And, it wasn't as fun to me anymore. I never did my act in order, but I wasn't having the fun. So I left the business for a very long time, but I moved to LA to pursue writing, which I've done some writing. And I read a cookbook.
What kind of writing?
Well, I optioned a screenplay of my first year in Hollywood. It was about a Philadelphia sports mascot. Never got made. I got like $1,500, but if it sold, I would have got $100,000. But that was the thing. And then, I was just helping some people. I wrote for a website for a lot of jokes for a website where my comedy mentor, a guy named Jeff Martyr, had a creative, and he brought me on because we had met. And so I took over the creative. And then a few years ago, actually, I wrote a cookbook because I had been in a hospital with congestive heart failure, and I had to watch my sodium. So I wrote a book called Stop the Salt. Basically, I took a bunch of restaurant recipes I found online, but put humorous anecdotes and did it. And that was some of the writing I did, and I wrote a play that ran for a few nights in Hollywood. And
what was the name of the play?
It's called Conversations with a Mouse. It was about a guy talking to a mouse. And the funny thing about LA is everybody looks too much into something. Like after the show, people were like, oh yeah, so the mouse is the guy's conscience. I'm like, no, the guy's just talking to a mouse. I don't know. They're like, yeah, but they're always like, the underlying this. I'm like, no, there's no underlying. I just wrote a story about a guy and a mouse. And then when my friend had a theater, he said, you should put it up. So I put another, like a neighbor, and I played the landlord, actually. I was the landlord in it. And I was just like, there's no conscience. No, it's just a dude talking to a mouse. And that was it. But that's LA. Everyone always has to look for something, everything's, reason. I mean, with my podcast, I laugh because sometimes I get people, I had a guy ask me, do I get paid? I'm like, yeah, well, I just interviewed Niels Lofgren from the East Street Band and Don Felder from the Eagles. Yeah, for nothing. I'm gonna pay you. And I said the hell with it. I didn't want him on my show because it's LA. They just, Yeah. But I gotta say that all these celebrities I've interviewed, all have been nice. And I swear on that. No one's been a jerk. They've been so nice, and I've become friendly with some of them. And now I'm getting some of my old guests back because I haven't seen them in 4 or 5 years. And it's like with comedy. When you don't see a comic for a long time and you work with them, all that time dissipates. You're just where you were before.
Yes. Well, I would love to pick your brain how you have lasted this long in the podcast business, because I did 29 episodes in Portland, Oregon at Harvey's of the Headliners. And then all the rest of the 400 interviews are here during this time we're going through that we're all in together. But I want to keep doing this the rest of my life.
Well, it's one of those things, you go in hills and valleys, and I'll be honest, like for me, I'll go into a booking slump. I won't get anyone, and I start getting really frustrated. And then all of a sudden, 2 days later, I book 5 guests. And that's the thing. You just have to stick with it. And the thing about podcasting too, which people don't get, is I just interviewed a guy from the rock band Nelson. It was Ricky Nelson's son. He has twins.
Yeah.
And he posted it on his Facebook page. And what people have to understand that when you do a podcast is no one's going to give you the credit. Like they all were saying to him, "Oh, great job, Matthew." And I'm like, I asked the questions, and that's the thing. People who have egos, they can't be a good interviewer because they don't want to listen, and it's about them. And to be honest, people don't want to hear about me when I have my guests on. They want to hear about the guy, who was in Springsteen's band or the guy who created Everyone Loves Raymond. And that's the thing when you host, people don't get it. It's not about you. A podcast is about your guests, making them feel special, and your listeners. But a lot of comics can't do that because they have an ego and they're trying to go for the laugh. I mean, my show is not a comedy. Like I don't have it under comedy because it's not. I would tell comics, I don't want any bits. Don't do your bits on my show unless they come up organically. And that's all. You just keep with it, and you do. I mean, you get to love it. It's like, and if you don't do it, I was in a hospital for 8 days a year ago, and I couldn't do any interviews, and I was like jonesing. I was like, damn, I miss this, And then when I got out, I was like, how it is. You've been doing it all the time.
Well, not as long as you have, and not as many. So my hat's off to you. So
well, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I'm vetting out veterans here today. Did you ever serve in the military?
No, but my father was in D-Day in the Navy.
The Navy. Because I can look at a person and I can tell that they have military in their family. Because I was like picking up military from you. So I'm the Long Island medium, but at large.
Okay. He was in D-Day. He stormed D-Day.
That's so cool. What did he do?
He was a quartermaster on a ship. Mm-hmm. And he got honored by the French government right here in New Jersey. And every year, I guess they're called battalions or whatever, the crew, they would sit there and they would meet at Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. And he found out later, and he's passed away since, but he found out probably when he was like 60 or 65 about this get together. So him and my mom would drive down every year to Tennessee, and it was like a big party. These guys hadn't seen each other in years, and they bring gifts. And it was pretty interesting. And he never talked about it until few years back. He showed me an article in some magazine that had he was mentioned in it, but he never talked about it.
So do you have any idea what your father was doing in the Navy during World War II when they announced that the war was over?
I have no idea, but I know he in this article he wrote that when they were getting ready to storm Normandy, mm-hmm. no matter what your religion was, everyone met down in the bottom and there was a big prayer service. And everyone bonded together, and then it went from there.
Super. I'm speechless. I don't know how to thank your father for his service except to say it to you. Thank you for your father's service.
You're welcome.
Mm-hmm. Got a lump in my throat now. How do you do a podcast with that, Steve Cooper?
You know what? I never get a lump because I babble. I babble too much. It's hard. Actually, I did talk to someone whose son had OD'd, and this gentleman was on my show before. We became friends, and he broke down in the interview and almost started crying. And that's hard because you got to keep it going. You can't sit there and, you can't sound like a jerk, but you're there to do an interview, and we came out of it good. But it's weird because you feel bad. You feel their pain. And as an interviewer, you got to keep it going. And that's the one thing that's good. It's so challenging at times to do interviews, but they're just so fun. You'll get a guest who is very quiet and you get to feel them out. And then, because I don't prepare anything. I have no questions written. I just
me neither. No.
Yeah, you should, because it's organic. But yeah, so that's how I do it. And you have to keep hold of that ship. You got to keep it going straight. It can veer off path, but at the end, that's the finish in the port.
Absolutely. So the reason I asked about your father is my parents were in concentration camps. And anytime I hear about a veteran of World War II, I want to know, like I love finding out if they were releasing, the people out of concentration camps. That's what I was going for.
I don't know. I mean, he was on a boat. I mean, that's all I know. As I said, it was so long ago. And as I said, they don't talk about it. He never talked about it. We had a flag from his boat in the basement. He had some medals, and but no, never talked about it.
Okay, well, that's quite the heritage to have a father that was in V-Day over in World War II. And if you guys don't know what V-Day is, I'm not going to say which group of people, just Google it. There's a lot to learn about V-Day. It's out there. It doesn't stand for the female body part, by the way. So, Steve, you were funny when you were young, and you decided to do comedy or acting first?
Comedy. I was a stand-up man. I didn't even think about, like, back then we didn't think about acting. At the clubs in Philly, some guy came in and said, "Oh, yeah, I'm doing this to get a sitcom." We didn't want to talk to him because you were a comic first. Showed up to be a comedian. You didn't think about acting, and that's what all of us did. And we all were there to do comedy, and we busted our asses. And it was cool. Some people ended up getting into acting because you're not going to turn down a sitcom or whatever. But we all, our first love, and my first love was stand-up, and I loved it. I did. I mean, now I perform maybe 4 times a year, in the area. Last time I performed, I headlined a show. I had been on stage for 2 months. I did 45 minutes, had a blast. And I'm like, I should do this again. But then I'm like, yeah, you know what? I don't feel like driving 45 minutes on a Saturday night. I'd rather just chill. I did that. I did the road for 6 or 7 years. And it's a young man's game, and it was, and I had a blast. But now I'm like, I like it when I get on stage, but I just don't do it as much because I've been there. I've done that. I don't need to sit there and go, oh yeah, those were the days. I feel bad for some people that do that still, or that they've been doing comedy forever and they've never made a living for it. And it's like, it's got to be hard. It's got to be hard. I mean, it's a different lifestyle. And now with everything closed, some scared ass people out there.
So you're absolutely right about that. It's a different world. And you come from Philly. Now, Philly, again, people, if you haven't researched Philly comics, some of the best comics on the planet come from Philly in history. So who were your favorite Philly legends that you know of before you and during your time? Mentioned a couple.
I know he's a monster. But man, I loved Cosby when I was young. I remember I had the cassette, Best of Bill Cosby and Buck, that story and all that stuff. And, Dom Irrera was a great comic. Todd Glass came out of Philly. Todd Glass started when he was like 16. There's a guy named Grover Silcox, who no one knows really who he is. He has a PBS show out here. Funniest guy I ever met. He got me my break with the one booker, Andy Scarpati. Grover liked me, took me to a gig. And the next week, Andy at the time had 7 clubs. Andy gave me 35 weekends of work as an MC. And it was just like, he said, open your calendar. And it was great. And that's one guy I wish people knew. I wish more people knew of Grover Silcox. David Brenner was a great Philly comic.
I was hoping you'd say David Brenner. He's like one of my favorites of all time.
Well, funny is I didn't know this, but he went out with a figure skater, Ty Babylonia, for many years because she was on my show. We were talking about it, and I was like, I didn't know you went out with David Brenner. It was right after he passed away, like the year before. She went out with him for a long time.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow, I love his comedy. And you got Jimmy Shubert and Paul Lyons too.
Yeah, Schubert's an old friend. Maybe a quick, funny Jimmy Shubert story. Schubert used to come by. I'd have parties in LA, pop over once in a while. And when I was moving back to New Jersey, I had a garage, like a yard sale, and I had this figurine of Tony Gaza from the loan shark in Rocky. Someone gave it to me, so I put it up, and I get a message from Schubert. Yeah, Coop, I need the Gaza, Cooper. You got to give me the Gaza. So he comes over, and the bastard pays me in a check, gives me a $10 check, and I'm like, dude, I'm about to move. I don't want to run to the bank. But Schubert's great. Jimmy, I was down in Atlantic City on some business, and Jimmy was performing. This was a while ago. We were hosting a happy hour for my job, and he walked down. We hung out for a little bit, then he went back and did his show at the Hard Rock. Yeah, I've known Jimmy for a while. He's a good guy.
Yeah, he is. I saw him play to an audience in Portland, Oregon, an audience of maybe 5 real customers at the Hard Rock in Portland, Oregon, and he played it like you would play Madison Square Garden.
Oh yeah, he's great. He has so much energy, and he's just he's a powerful act. You know, he's just a strong act and just a good guy.
Yep. So what have you learned along the way in acting and comedy that you didn't know you were going to learn? Maybe it was painful.
You know, I think not that I learned, I think it instilled in me, and I knew this already, but people don't understand, you know, you always have to show up. You can't be an ass. You know, that's the one thing I learned, you know. I always was a good networker, and I always got work from comics because they always liked me. They say, oh, do you work for this guy? I just learned you can't be a jerk, you know, and that's like anything in life, though. You know, there's so many comics who are arrogant and they're jerks. And, you know, I've talked to them when they said, you know, I was such an ass when I was younger and I learned the hard way. That's the thing I learned, you know, and it's just not anything. You still be an ass. You know, if you want to get work, if you want people to be nice to you, just show up, you know, bust your chops, even if it's 2 people in the audience, like you said with Jimmy, 5 people in the audience, you know, you still deliver because there are 5 people that paid. And, you know, you don't want to screw them. It's not their fault that there's no one there. They're there to see you. And that's what I learned. You bring it, you know, it's like you bring it.
Yes, he brought it. Oh my gosh. That made me, you know, I was brand new, maybe a year into comedy at the time, and it really taught me how to be a professional. I saw what he was doing, you know, with only that many in the audience, and he was delivering it like he didn't know he wasn't at Madison Square Garden.
He's a true pro.
Yes, that's what it is. So what is like a moment when you've been around professional actors or comedians and something went terribly wrong, whether it was somebody was going to get in? Do you have any funny, scary stories? Or I think this is so fun to go through.
I was doing my podcast in Burbank in the studio, and I had Ed Asner on. You know, Ed Asner's a legend. I mean, the guy's, you know, and he was so nice, but I remember the studio was really, really hot. And he had this driver, this guy because he needed help because he comes in, his pants are pulled up to here, he's walking with a cane. And because the studio was so hot, I was getting tired. In the middle of a sentence, he dozed off and he was asleep for like 30 seconds. And I didn't want to say anything. Then he woke up and he was fine. And after he's like, I want to come back. And I'm like, you just fell asleep on me. But nothing, you know, there were so many stories, and you sit there and you forget them. I mean, you know, because they're so long ago. But I mean, it was just wild days back in the late 80s, early 90s doing comedy. I mean, we were like rock stars. You know, you travel up and down the East Coast, you'd party your ass off, you'd be stuck in you know, as I say, you work half an hour a night. You know, and the rest of the time, you know, you have to be good, else you're going to get yourself in trouble. So.
Absolutely. So what did make you decide, since Philly comics thought acting was beneath doing their passion of comedy, what made you decide to go ahead and get some acting credits?
Well, it wasn't, as you get older, you go, you know what, you're not going to be doing comedy forever. So I was lucky. When I moved to LA, I got a commercial agent really quick. I never booked anything. I booked like a little thing. And then it was just fun. I had a sketch troupe that ran for a year in Hollywood called The Bitter Optimists. I wrote the whole show, directed it, and cast my friends. And then I was in this really, really bad movie that I just found on Tubi TV. It's a station here. It was called Killer Drag Queens on Dope. And it's 17 years old. And it starred Alexis Arquette and the guy who played Freddie Boom Boom Washington on Welcome Back, Kotter. And I'm in 20 minutes of it. And I was watching it. And it's when digital movies just started coming out. The quality is so bad. But I look at it, I get shot, I feel up a drag queen, I get beat up. It was fun, and that's what I did it. And it was like, the thing is, acting though, it's so tough. You know, I know guys who've had sitcoms and drama shows, and then things start changing. There's guys, you know, the industry's changed. It's one of the reasons why I moved too. The industry's changed to the point that you're not making the money you used to. These actors aren't making it. Those, you know, I know a guy who was on a series for 3 years. Then he was in that movie, one of the Disney movies. He played a mariachi in it, a voice. Then he didn't work for a year and a half. And it's like, you know, and that's the thing. It's a tough biz, and it's, if you want to be happy, you know, you really have to give your all, and then you got to also sit there and go, you know what, is this worth it? And a lot of times, I didn't think it was. You know, I'd rather, you know, I don't want to scratch around. You know, I don't want to have to worry about rent. You know, I'm not young. I'm 56 years old. You know, I'm not doing that. You know, I want stability, and I know I can do my podcast whenever I want.
Absolutely. How is the podcast? I mean, you've gotten rock stars, legends, Emmy, Oscar people. So what made you do this particular Cooper Talk? And, you know, like, what's the theory behind, how did it start? How did it evolve? Where's it going? I'm dying to hear about Cooper Talk.
It started, I was a marketing manager for a restaurant in Burbank, and I would go to a lot of events. I met a guy who had an internet station. It was Indy100.com. The studio was right there on Olive in Burbank. And I said, I want to do a show. He goes, okay. He goes, you know, I said, I want to interview different people. He goes, yeah, but it's an indie music station. You got to do half music. I said, all right. So I get guests. I started getting guests, guys I knew, Paul F. Tompkins, comics I knew. I ran into Kato Kaelin, Darren Carter, different stuff, and they come in the studio. And then I was getting, one day, the music, I didn't play any music, I just did talk. And the guys, like, everyone really liked it. So I just started, I would go through Facebook. And I remember I loved the actor Robbie Benson. So I sent him a message on Facebook, and this is new. And he's like, his wife got back and said, yeah, he'd love to do it. So I have Robbie Benson in the studio. And then I get this actor in the studio. And then I was friends with a drummer for one band, and he got me this musician. And then I would just start meeting people. And then I started getting this resume of, we get a lot of character actors that love to talk, they have the best stories. A lot of drummers, because drummers have great stories. And it just started snowballing. And I send a letter to someone. I'm like, this person's been on my show. And you'd be surprised. I really don't get turned down a lot. A lot of times, you don't get any response sometimes, but that's a given. But yeah, so I just did that. And, you know, the Cooper Talk, I love eventually it to be, you know, picked up some way, but we'll see what happens. I just love doing it now. And I love the fact that I interview so many people that, like musicians, that I listened to when I was younger, and I really dug their music. And then next thing you know, I'm on the phone with them. I mean, sometimes I look through my contacts in my phone, and I would never call these people because, you know, but I'm like, God, I have this person's number. I said to my wife, you know, when I first started dating my wife, she would come to LA like once every 3 months, and I would come back here once a month. But I'd always book guests off shows that she liked. So I'd look cool, like Kate Flannery from The Office, or I had a Seinfeld writer on, or, you know, Terry Nunn from Berlin. And I would just be great. She wasn't, you know, she lived in this area. It's in South Jersey. You don't run into celebrities. You know, for me, it's secondhand. I mean, you just get used to it. It's like, after you talk to them, and you know this, you talk to a lot of people, you just find out they're just regular people, man. They're not, you know, that's it.
Yes, absolutely. I love talking to, you know, everybody and trying to get people to open up and relax. And, you know, if they can feel like you're listening and you get them to relax, sometimes the most amazing stuff comes out of them.
Oh yeah. I've heard people tell me stories that you're like, what? Like out of nowhere. Cause I don't go for that TMZ stuff. If someone had a drug problem, I don't bring it up. If they bring it up, that's fine. But I had one rocker next told me this whole story about how he shot a maid and was going to go to jail. And it came out of nowhere. It was just organic. And that's when you sit there and go, that's when you know they trust you. And that's the whole thing when you interview someone, getting them to trust you. That's what's important.
Absolute. I sit there afterwards and go, I talk too much, you know, and I have a coach. Do you know who Gladys Simon is in New York?
No.
Well, she told me she was watching my interview. And she's like, "You smile too much." I'm
Yeah, but
trying
you know
not.
what?
I'm trying not to smile.
Yeah, you should smile. You're having fun. If you don't
I'm having
smile,
the. I'm
you don't want
having
to
the
look like
time of my life.
you don't want to look grumpy.
I
I don't
know.
want to sit with a scowl if you're like,
I'm trying not to. She says that it takes the attention away from my guests when I smile
nah,
too much.
nah. People listen, what's funny is when we do this stuff, you go live and stuff like that, in an interview, a lot of times people get caught up in what you're talking about. They really don't pay attention. They don't really pay attention to our facial characteristics. For me, the only thing Zoom is good for is because I can read my guest. Because when you're not on the phone, you sometimes don't know if they stop or if they pause, and you cut them off, you feel like a jerk. But with Zoom, you can see the face to face. That's what it's good for.
So great that way. I can get a read and I get exactly what you're trying to say. So where do you plan what is the future for you after the not I know we're in a pandemic, but when the world reopens, say next year, it's back, you're already staying with doing Cooper Talk podcast, and you don't want to be a road comic, but there's all kind of things in the close area around you that'll come up, right? Like Borgata or.
Well, yeah, you know what? As I said, if I feel like driving, I'll do it. On all honesty, I go to my one friend's club, but for me, it's like, I just want to, keep doing my show and get my show as good as it can and keep getting a good guests because that's what brings me the most happiness. I also do want to write a book, sort of a novel comedy, dark comedy thing that I eventually will. There's things in my mind, and I also just started another podcast. Did the first episode. It's called Young and Black and Old and White. And it's with my friend Wesley Parker, who I met in LA at my friend's pizza place. And now he lives in South Jersey. He's a 32-year-old African-American guy. I'm an old white guy. So our episode, we just got on and we just talked about some stuff that's going on. We talked about sports. We just thought it'd be something fun because now with all, the race and everything going on, it's good to hear from someone who actually, has a hand in the card game.
Yes.
I have white privilege. I know that. We talked about that, me and him.
Yeah.
But he also knows, I said he grew up in Compton, but then he was in foster kids, but now he's married. He has 3 kids. He's done well for himself. And he said it's crazy because he's married to a white woman. And so it's very weird. Like when kids, people, their kids are great looking. I don't know how, because he's an ugly dude. His kids are adorable. His wife's good looking, but his kids are gorgeous. But so yes,
I think I prefer him to his wife, and I've never seen his wife.
he's sweet. They're good. They're good people. But we just we're gonna see what happens with that too. Because right now it's so easy to record. I just go in the corner. I have my I use just a little microphone. I put it up to it, records, pop it into Podbean, and my episodes are up.
We've almost gone an hour, and I was trying to keep it to 15 minutes.
We've done 40. I was worried about it. So
yeah, we did.
We want to keep it short.
Today's a short day. I only have 2 others, so it'll all work out.
What's you interviewing?
It's really expensive doing it T-Mobile hotspot. Don't do it that way, you guys, unless you have to.
Who else are you interviewing today?
Today, I'm interviewing Julie Drake. Do you know who that is?
Yeah, I'm friends with her on Facebook. She's from like Kansas or Missouri, I think.
Something short like hair. That. Very darling looking. And then hopefully Tim Skaggs, Skaggs.
I don't know that. I don't know him.
Well, I'm waiting for a confirmation. So
good.
But on the 9th, I get Bobby Rydell. Can you believe it?
That's great. That's a good interview.
Is that it's only funny stories.
Okay.
Just well, good. Like I want to hear all your funny stories.
That's good.
Yeah, that's all I want out of that interview, and that'll be great. Get him to tell. Imagine all the stories he's got.
That's the thing. I talk to some of these guys who are in heavy metal bands, and man, The stories these guys have, you just sit there and go, metal bands from the 80s. You're just like, I mean, you're talking debauchery. I had a guy telling me stories how Richie Zambora taught him a place at the Philadelphia Spectrum where you could take a girl and do coke when you got off stage, and it was right under the sound booth. And they're telling you these things, and you're like, oh my God, it was decadence, man. It was insane. And the thing is, most of those guys are now married with kids. A lot of them are sober, and they just have these stories that are just, you're like, what? How? I mean, yeah, it's like, forget about it. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, anyway, on a closing note, first of all, thank you so much for letting me interview you, Steve Cooper. The last thing I would love to have you explain is, of all the things, the acting, the comedy, meeting people, your podcast, which is amazing, Cooper Talk, what's the best moment you've had in your public life?
The best what?
Best public life moment you ever had that you'll never forget?
Honestly, I think it was the first time I was ever on stage doing that Rick Springfield air guitar at Mr. Stockton. And it's because I was a freshman and I destroyed it. I was getting dates with juniors and seniors in my college. I was on the news. I was in a newspaper, and I took second, but the guys told me the guy who won was in the frat who sponsored it. So they told me it was fixed. But that's what started it all. That just started the whole, wow, just being on stage stuff is fun. And if it wasn't for that night, I may have gone to law school. I don't know what I would have done. I have a degree in business, but that was the one moment that changed my life. And I was 18, I was 19, I think, I'm guessing.
Wow.
Long
Thank
time
you
ago.
so much. Now that you're a graduate of Comic Spot, anytime something opens up that you want to plug, let me know you want to come back on and plug something for 5 or 10.
I will. Thank you so much. This was great. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve Cooper. And podcast number 1 of his is Cooper Talk. And he's starting at what?
CooperTalk.net.
Oh, that's the name of the podcast? Cooper Talk.
That's my website. They can find all the episodes. They can find all the episodes at CooperTalk.net. All the episodes are there.
Okay. And the other podcast that you're doing with Wesley Parker Jr.?
Yeah, that's you can find that at, we just put it up, ybow.podbean.com. YBOW is a short for young and black and old and white. So it's ybow.podbean.com.
Will you type those to me so I can add them correctly to the post and not botch them?
Oh, yeah, sure. No problem.
Thank you so much, Steve Cooper.
Great day.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Everybody's talking